Mabel's joy knew no bounds when she finally gave birth to her son, Junior, after 10 years of waiting and countless nights of silent tears. For years, she had endured the harsh whispers of neighbors and the mocking words of her mother-in-law, Mama Nkechi, who never missed an opportunity to remind her that a barren woman is no true wife. When the midwife placed Junior in her arms at the local clinic, Mabel's heart swelled with gratitude. He wasn't just a baby to her. He was a miracle, a testimony of God's faithfulness. "You are my everything," she whispered, cradling the tiny bundle in her arms. Her husband, Sam, was equally overwhelmed with emotion, though his joy was more subdued. As a man, he had faced the shame of unanswered questions and probing looks from his extended family. Now, with Junior's arrival, he felt a sense of relief. "Thank God," he said, holding his wife's hand. "Our prayers have been answered." The day they brought Junior home, Mabel's transformation into a fiercely protective mother began. As they pulled into the compound of their modest bungalow in Enugu, Mabel instructed the domestic staff to gather in the living room. Her voice was calm but firm as she addressed them. "This child is my miracle," she said, her eyes scanning the faces of the cook, the cleaner, and the nanny. "I want everyone to be extremely careful. No one touches him without my permission. If I hear any complaints or see anyone mishandling him, that will be your last day in this house." The staff nodded silently, their expressions a mix of confusion and fear. Mama Nkechi, who had come to help with the baby, clicked her tongue in disapproval. "You're already behaving like this boy is a king," she muttered under her breath. Ignoring the comment, Mabel turned to Junior, who was nestled peacefully in his baby carrier. "You will lack nothing, my son," she promised. "No one will ever hurt you." Her devotion to Junior became evident in the days that followed. Mabel insisted on personally attending to every detail of his care, from bathing him to feeding him. She wouldn't let the nanny near him, often saying, "No one can care for him the way I do." At first, Sam found her actions amusing. "Mabel, relax," he joked one evening as she sterilized Junior's feeding bottles for the third time in an hour. "He's not the first child in the world." Mabel shot him a sharp look. "You don't understand, Sam. This boy is special. He's my answer from God." But as the weeks turned into months, Sam began to notice the lengths to which Mabel would go to protect Junior. She dismissed 2 housemaids in quick succession, accusing one of being careless and the other of pinching Junior during bath time. "I won't tolerate anyone hurting my child," she declared. Mama Nkechi, however, was not impressed. "Mabel, you're overdoing it," she said one afternoon as they sat on the veranda. "If you don't allow this boy to grow naturally, you'll regret it." But Mabel dismissed her with a wave of her hand. "Mama, please, you can say what you like. I'll raise my son the way I want." Junior's early years were filled with the kind of love and attention most children only dream of. Mabel doted on him endlessly, ensuring he had the best clothes, the best toys, and the best care money could buy. If he so much as whimpered in his crib, she would rush to his side, scooping him up and singing softly until he fell asleep again. To the outside world, Mabel's love for Junior seemed admirable, but within the walls of their home, it was beginning to take on an intensity that even Sam found unsettling. "Mabel," he said one evening as they prepared for bed, "you're not allowing this boy to be a child. You're suffocating him." But Mabel dismissed his concerns. "You're just saying that because you don't spend enough time with him. You're always busy with work." Sam sighed, knowing there was no point in arguing. Mabel's love for Junior was like a raging fire, passionate, consuming, and if left unchecked, potentially destructive. As the chapter closed, Mabel rocked Junior to sleep, humming a lullaby. In her heart, she believed she was doing everything right. But little did she know, the seeds of her overprotective love were already being sown, setting the stage for challenges that would test her family in ways she could never have imagined. This chapter sets the tone for the story, showing the depth of Mabel's love for Junior and hinting at the struggles ahead as her devotion begins to blur the lines of healthy parenting. Mabel's life revolved around Junior from the moment they returned home from the hospital. Her joy was unmatched, and her every thought was about keeping him safe and happy. To her, Junior wasn't just a child. He was a miracle, a sign that her prayers had finally been answered. She promised herself that she would never allow anything or anyone to harm him. But this love, though pure in her eyes, slowly began to grow into something excessive. In their small Nigerian community, where people loved to gossip, it didn't take long for neighbors to notice how Mabel treated Junior. While other children ran barefoot around the compound, playing football or fetching water from the communal tap, Junior was always indoors, never allowed to mingle with other kids. If anyone dared to touch him or scold him, Mabel would respond with anger. One evening, Sam tried to have a conversation with Mabel about her behavior. "Mabel, don't you think you're being too overprotective? Junior needs to play with other children. He needs to experience life," he said gently. Mabel looked at him with a determined expression. "Sam, you don't understand. Do you know what it means to wait for 10 years and hear people mock you every day? Do you know what it feels like to finally have what you prayed for? Junior is not like other children. He is my miracle, and I will do whatever it takes to protect him." Sam sighed and shook his head. "But Mabel, he's not just your son. He's our son. We need to raise him together and teach him to be independent." But Mabel waved off his concerns. "You're worrying for nothing. Junior is just a child. He will grow up in his own time." As Junior grew older, Mabel's overprotectiveness became more apparent. When he was 3 years old, Mabel fired their housemaid Amina because Junior complained that Amina had pinched him during bath time. Mabel didn't even bother to confirm the truth of the story. "Mama, Junior, I swear I didn't pinch him," Amina cried, tears streaming down her face as she packed her things. "The boy just doesn't like me. How dare you call my son a liar?" Mabel shouted, "Pack your things and leave my house now." From that day on, Mabel took over all of Junior's care. She bathed him, dressed him, and fed him herself. Even at night, she would sit by his bed, watching him sleep, afraid that he might wake up and need her. Her life became completely consumed by Junior. In the neighborhood, people started to talk. At church, during women's fellowship meetings, the topic of Mabel and Junior often came up. "This Mabel is too attached to her son," one woman said, shaking her head. "It's not good for the boy." "True talk," another woman replied. "If she doesn't let go small, that boy will grow up spoiled." Even Mom Nkechi, who had once mocked Mabel for being childless, started to voice her concerns. "Mabel, you are spoiling this child," she said one afternoon during a family gathering. "A child who doesn't learn to stand on his own 2 feet will struggle in life." But Mabel refused to listen. "Mama Nkechi, please leave me alone. Junior is my child, and I will raise him how I see fit." Junior, on the other hand, enjoyed the special attention he received from his mother. He refused to play with other children, choosing instead to follow Mabel around the house. If she tried to sit with Sam and have a conversation, Junior would interrupt, tugging at her wrapper and demanding her attention. "Mama, come and play with me," he would shout. Sam grew increasingly frustrated. "Mabel, this is not normal. You are not helping him grow," he said one evening after Junior threw a tantrum because Mabel was laughing at one of Sam's jokes. "Sam, he's just a child," Mabel replied dismissively. "He loves me. Don't be jealous." But Sam wasn't jealous. He was worried. He could see what Mabel couldn't, that her overprotectiveness was stunting Junior's growth and making him overly dependent on her. What Sam feared the most was that this behavior would only get worse as Junior grew older. By the time Junior was 4, he was inseparable from Mabel. He wouldn't eat unless she fed him, wouldn't sleep unless she tucked him in, and wouldn't play unless she was right beside him. Mabel saw it as love, but others saw it as a problem. Sam tried to intervene one last time. "Mabel, listen to me. This is not healthy for him or for us. You're creating a bond that will be difficult to break later. Let him grow." But Mabel refused to listen. "Sam, you worry too much. Junior is my son. I know what's best for him." Unbeknownst to Mabel, her excessive love was planting seeds of dependency in Junior that would soon grow into something much darker. While she saw herself as a loving mother, she was unknowingly creating a dangerous pattern, one that would soon threaten to tear the family apart. This was only the beginning. Junior's dependence on Mabel continued to grow as he approached his 4th birthday. By now, everyone in the neighborhood could see that something was not quite right. Unlike other children who ran around the compound, kicking footballs, climbing trees, and making mischief, Junior stayed glued to his mother's side like her shadow. It wasn't just his refusal to play with other children that raised eyebrows. Junior seemed to view his mother as the center of his entire world. If Mabel laughed with Sam, Junior would immediately interrupt. "Mama, come and see this toy," he would demand, even if he wasn't playing with it. At first, Mabel found it endearing. "My son loves me so much," she would say proudly to anyone who commented on his clinginess. But Sam wasn't impressed. "Mabel, this is not normal," he said one evening as they sat in the living room. "You are turning this boy into something else. He doesn't play with other children, he doesn't listen to me, and he throws a tantrum anytime you're not around. This is not healthy." Mabel frowned and crossed her arms. "Sam, what do you want me to do? Push him away? Ignore him? He's just a child. Children need their mothers. Yes, but they also need to learn independence. This boy doesn't even know how to relate to other people. All he knows is you." Mabel sighed heavily, feeling attacked. "Sam, you don't understand what it means to carry a child in your womb after 10 years of waiting. I won't apologize for loving my son." Their conversations often ended this way, with Sam frustrated and Mabel standing firm in her belief that she was doing the right thing. Junior himself seemed perfectly happy with the way things were. To him, his mother was a safe haven, his playmate, and his entire world. He didn't see the need to interact with the other children in the compound, who often made fun of him for being Mama's boy. "Junior, why you no day play ball with us?" one boy asked one afternoon. "I don't want to," Junior replied curtly. "You day fear? Abi you know sabi play," another boy teased. Junior ignored them and ran back into the house, where Mabel was preparing jollof rice in the kitchen. "Mama, they're laughing at me again," he said, tugging at her wrapper. Mabel wiped her hands on a towel and knelt to his level. "Don't mind them, my dear. They're just jealous because you have a mother who loves you so much." Junior smiled, reassured by her words. As time went on, Junior's behavior became more troubling. He began to throw tantrums whenever Mabel wasn't around. If she went to the market or stepped out to visit a friend, he would scream, cry, and refuse to eat until she returned. One day, Mabel left him with Sam to run errands. "He'll be fine," she assured Sam. "Just make sure he eats." But the moment she left, Junior's mood darkened. "Where is Mama?" he asked repeatedly. "She went to the market," Sam replied. "No, I want Mama now," Junior screamed, throwing himself on the floor. Sam tried to comfort him, but Junior slapped his hand away. "You're not my mama. Go away." By the time Mabel returned, Junior was red-eyed and hoarse from crying. Sam was fuming. "Mabel, this boy needs help. You are the one causing all this. He doesn't even respect me as his father." Mabel picked Junior up and rocked him in her arms. "Sam, stop shouting. You're scaring him. He's just a child." Sam shook his head in frustration. "You're not helping him, Mabel. You're making him worse." The elders in the community also began to notice Junior's strange attachment to his mother. Mama Nkechi, who had once mocked Mabel for being childless, now became her harshest critic. "Mabel, this your son no day behave like other children," she said one evening during a family gathering. "Nah, so children day behave when their mama no draw boundary. You know fit, Let him hold your wrapper forever. Mom and Ketchy, a beg, leave me alone, Mabel replied, her voice sharp. Junior is my son. I will raise him however I want. But even Mabel couldn't ignore some of the things Junior began to do. Whenever Sam tried to hold her hand or hug her, Junior would push his father away and cling to her. He's just showing how much he loves me, Mabel would say, laughing nervously. But Sam wasn't amused. Mabel, this boy doesn't see you as his mother anymore. He's acting like you're his property. Mabel dismissed his concerns, but deep down, she began to wonder if there was some truth to his words. By the time Junior turned 5, the early signs of trouble had become impossible to ignore. His jealousy, tantrums, and refusal to interact with others hinted at a deeper problem. But Mabel remained blind to the consequences of her actions, convinced that her love for Junior could never harm him. Junior's attachment to Mabel only grew stronger as the days passed. He no longer played with toys on his own or found joy in the company of other children. Instead, he followed Mabel everywhere, like her shadow. It didn't matter whether she was in the kitchen preparing soup or sitting outside peeling cassava. Junior was always by her side. If she dared to move without informing him, he would cry as though his world had ended. One afternoon, while Mabel was cleaning the sitting room, Junior sat on the floor playing with his building blocks. Suddenly, he looked up at her and said, "Mama, you are the most beautiful woman in the world." Mabel smiled, thinking it was a sweet compliment from her young son. "Thank you, my love," she replied, stroking his hair. Junior grinned. "I will always protect you, Mama. No one will take you away from me." His words warmed Mabel's heart, but Sam, who was reading a newspaper nearby, frowned. "Junior, your mama is my wife," he said gently but firmly. "She belongs to this family, not just you." Junior's expression darkened, and he shot Sam a defiant look. "No, she is mine," he declared, his voice louder than usual. Sam sighed heavily. "Mabel, do you see what I've been talking about? This boy is too attached to you. It's not healthy." "Sam, stop exaggerating," Mabel replied dismissively. "He's just a child. He doesn't know any better." "Exactly, Mabel. That's why you should be teaching him the right things," Sam retorted, folding the newspaper angrily. But Mabel refused to listen. To her, Junior's behavior was a sign of love, not something to be worried about. She continued to indulge him, brushing aside Sam's concerns and the murmurs of the neighbors. One evening, as Mabel finished bathing, she walked into her room wrapped in a towel. Junior, as usual, was on her bed playing with his toy truck. "Mama, why do you always wrap yourself in that big towel?" he asked curiously. Mabel laughed lightly. "Because I just finished bathing, my love." Junior tilted his head. "But you don't need to. It's just me. I'm your son." She didn't think much of it and sat beside him, drying her hair. "One day, you'll understand these things," she said with a smile. Junior reached out and tugged at her towel playfully. "I want to see Mama," he said innocently. Mabel gently pushed his hand away. "That's enough now, Junior. Go and brush your teeth before bed." Later that night, as they lay on the bed, Junior snuggled close to Mabel and said, "Mama, you are the only one I need. I don't want you to love anyone else." His words sounded innocent enough, but there was a tone in his voice that made Mabel pause for a moment. She stroked his back and said, "Don't worry, my son. I will always love you." Over time, Mabel began to notice that Junior's behavior was changing in ways she couldn't ignore. He became increasingly possessive, even jealous, whenever Mabel interacted with Sam or anyone else. If Sam held her hand or joked with her, Junior would interrupt, demanding her attention. "Mama, come and sit with me," he would say, tugging at her wrapper. Sam's frustration reached a boiling point one evening. "Mabel, you need to set boundaries," he said sternly. "This is not normal. You're creating a problem, and it's going to get worse." "Sam, you're overreacting," Mabel replied, rolling her eyes. Junior just loves me. What's wrong with that? What's wrong? Sam snapped, slamming his hand on the table. What's wrong is that this boy doesn't respect anyone but you. He doesn't even respect me, his father. But Mabel waved him off again, convinced that her love for Junior was harmless. She believed that as long as her son was happy, nothing else mattered. As the days turned into weeks, Junior's possessiveness grew bolder. One evening, when Sam tried to carry Mabel's plate to the kitchen, Junior ran in front of him and shouted, "Leave it. I will do it." Sam stopped in his tracks, glaring at the boy. "Junior, what is wrong with you?" Junior puffed out his chest. "Mama doesn't need your help. She has me." Sam clenched his fists, trying to control his anger. "Mabel, you need to talk to this boy. This behavior is not right." But Mabel simply smiled and said, "He's just being protective." It's sweet. Sweet or not, the cracks in their family were beginning to show. Sam felt increasingly alienated, while Mabel remained blind to the consequences of her actions. Junior's attachment to her had grown into something far more intense, something that would soon spiral out of control. But for now, Mabel continued to live in her bubble, believing that her love for Junior was pure and unshakable. One quiet afternoon, Mabel was sitting on the veranda, watching Junior play with his toy car near the front yard. The compound was alive with the sounds of children laughing and playing, but Junior wasn't interested in joining them. Instead, he remained close to his mother, glancing over at her every few minutes to make sure she was still watching him. "Junior, go and play with your friends," Mabel called out gently. "No, Mama. I want to stay here with you," he replied, his small voice filled with stubborn determination. Mabel smiled and shook her head. "This boy she muttered under her breath, feeling both pride and concern. Later that day, their neighbor, Mr. Akin, walked into the compound carrying a bag of mangoes. He greeted warmly, handing one of the ripe fruits to Mabel. "Ah, Madam Mabel, good afternoon. How is Junior?" Mabel smiled. "He's fine, thank you, Mr. Akin." As Mr. Akin turned to leave, he looked at Junior and said cheerfully, "Junior, you're so lucky to have a beautiful and caring mother. You must always appreciate her." Junior's expression changed immediately. His small face darkened, and his grip on his toy car tightened. Before anyone could react, he dropped the toy and charged at Mr. Akin, shoving him hard against the compound wall. "Don't talk to her like that," Junior shouted, his voice trembling with anger. The scene unfolded so quickly that Mabel barely had time to process what had happened. Mr. Akin, stunned, raised his hands in defense. "Haba, what did I do?" he asked, looking at Mabel in confusion. "Junior," Mabel exclaimed, pulling her son away. "What is wrong with you?" Junior clung to her arm, his small body trembling with fury. "I don't want him talking to you, Mama. He shouldn't talk to you." Sam, who had been reading in the living room, heard the commotion and rushed outside. "What is going on here?" he demanded, his eyes narrowing as he took in the scene. Mabel tried to explain, but Junior interrupted. He was saying things to Mama. "I didn't like it." Sam's patience snapped. He grabbed Junior by the arm and shook him lightly. "Listen to me, boy. You don't ever act like this again, do you hear me? Apologize to Mr. Akin right now." But Junior only glared at his father, his small fist clenched. "No, I won't apologize." Sam's face turned red with frustration. "Mabel, talk to your son. This is your doing," he barked. Mabel, caught between guilt and defensiveness, crouched down and held Junior's face in her hands. "Junior, you must never act like this again. Do you hear me?" she said softly, trying to calm him. Junior's lips trembled and his eyes filled with tears. "But, Mama, I don't want anyone to take you away from me," he whispered. Mabel's heart softened. She hugged him tightly, brushing her fingers through his hair. "No one is taking me away, my son. I'm here for you, always." Sam stood there, shaking his head. "This is not normal, Mabel. Can't you see it? You're not helping this boy. He needs boundaries. But Mabel refused to hear it. He's just being protective, Sam. It's not that serious, she said dismissively, carrying Junior inside the house. That night, as they sat for dinner, the tension in the air was palpable. Sam barely spoke, his eyes fixed on his plate. Junior sat beside Mabel, refusing to eat unless she fed him. As she lifted a spoon to his mouth, Sam slammed his hand on the table. "Enough, Mabel. Enough. You are turning this boy into something I don't recognize. He's not a baby anymore. Stop treating him like one." Mabel's hand froze midair, her face flushed with embarrassment. Junior, sensing the tension, turned to his father with a boldness that surprised everyone. "Don't shout at Mama. She's doing nothing wrong." Sam's jaw dropped. He stared at his son, struggling to find the words. "You see what I'm talking about, Mabel? This boy thinks he's your husband, not your child. You are encouraging this behavior, and it's going to ruin him." Mabel placed a protective arm around Junior. "Sam, you don't understand. You're not always here. You don't see how much he needs me. He's my miracle, my son, and I will do whatever it takes to make him happy." Sam leaned back in his chair, defeated. "I pray you realize what you're doing before it's too late," he said quietly, standing up and walking out of the room. Mabel felt a pang of guilt, but pushed it aside. To her, all that mattered was Junior's happiness. What she didn't realize was that her actions were sowing the seeds for something far more dangerous than she could have imagined. One evening, after the incident with Mr. Akin, Mabel was sitting in the living room, deep in thought. The events of the day had unsettled her. Junior's behavior had crossed a line, but she couldn't bring herself to believe that it was entirely his fault. "He's just being protective," she muttered to herself, trying to push away the nagging feeling that something was wrong. Later that night, as she tucked Junior into bed, she kissed his forehead and whispered, "Mama loves you more than anything in this world." He smiled back at her, the innocent expression on his face masking the growing complexity of his feelings. The following day, while cleaning Junior's room, Mabel noticed a notebook sticking out from under his pillow. She hesitated for a moment, but then decided to pick it up. Junior was at school, and curiosity got the better of her. As she flipped through the pages, her heart began to race. The notebook was filled with writings and drawings, things that made her stomach churn. On one page, in bold letters, Junior had written, "My queen. No one can take her from me." On another page, there was a crude drawing of a man with a large X over his face. Next to it, he had scribbled, "I will fight him. She belongs to me." Mabel's hands trembled as she read the words. Her mind raced with questions. Was this just a phase? Was it harmless fantasy? Or had she unknowingly encouraged something far more dangerous? She closed the notebook quickly, her breathing uneven. By the time Junior returned home from school, Mabel had composed herself. She decided not to confront him about the notebook immediately, hoping it was just a passing obsession. But deep down, she couldn't shake the unease that had settled in her chest. The following weeks were tense. Junior's behavior grew more possessive. He insisted on accompanying Mabel everywhere, whether she was going to the market, visiting friends, or attending church meetings. His presence became a shadow, constant and unnerving. One Sunday afternoon, during a family gathering, Junior's jealousy took another disturbing turn. Mabel's younger cousin, Kemi, had come to visit. As Kemi chatted and laughed with Mabel, Junior's mood darkened. He stood in a corner, glaring at Kemi. When Kemi leaned in to hug Mabel goodbye, Junior suddenly shouted, "Don't touch her. She's my mama." The room fell silent, and all eyes turned to Junior. Sam, who had been quietly observing, decided he'd had enough. "Junior, that's enough. Go to your room now," he commanded, his voice firm. But Junior didn't budge. Instead, he stomped his foot and shouted, "You can't tell me what to do. She's my mama, not yours." Sam's face hardened, and he took a step forward. "Mabel, are you seeing this? Are you seeing what your pampering has done?" he said, his voice filled with frustration. Mabel quickly stepped between them. "Sam, he's just a child. Don't raise your voice at him," she said, her protective instincts kicking in. "That's the problem, Mabel. You always defend him, no matter what. This boy is not acting like a child. He's acting like a man who thinks he owns his mother." Sam stormed out of the room, leaving Mabel standing there, torn between her husband's frustration and her son's possessiveness. Junior ran to her side and clung to her, tears streaming down his face. "Mama, don't leave me," he whispered. That night, as Mabel lay in bed, her thoughts were a whirlwind. She replayed the events of the day, the notebook's contents, and Junior's growing jealousy. She wanted to believe it was just a phase, but deep down, she couldn't ignore the signs. The next day, while tidying up Junior's room again, she stumbled upon the notebook once more. This time, she decided to read it more carefully. Her heart sank as she came across more troubling entries. "No one can take her from me. I'll fight anyone who tries. She's mine forever." Tears welled up in her eyes as she realized the depth of her mistake. She had showered Junior with so much love, so much attention, that he had begun to see her as more than just a mother. Her blind devotion had blurred the lines of their relationship. She sat on the edge of Junior's bed, clutching the notebook, as a sense of guilt and fear consumed her. What had she done? Where had she gone wrong? She thought back to all the warnings Sam had given her, all the comments from friends and neighbors that she had dismissed. The weight of her actions bore down on her, but she couldn't find the courage to confront Junior. Instead, she placed the notebook back where she found it and resolved to keep a closer eye on him. But deep down, she knew that this was only the beginning of a much larger problem, one that she had unknowingly nurtured with her overprotective love. One evening, as Mabel was busy in the kitchen preparing yam porridge for dinner, Junior walked in. He seemed unusually quiet, his steps deliberate, as if he was carrying the weight of a secret. Mabel glanced at him briefly and smiled. "Junior, my son, are you hungry? Dinner will soon be ready," she said, wiping her hands on her apron. Junior shook his head but remained silent. He clutched a small notebook tightly to his chest, his eyes darting around the room nervously. Mabel noticed his behavior, but decided not to press him. "All right, go and wait in the living room. I'll call you when the food is ready," she said softly. Instead of leaving, Junior hesitated. He turned toward Mabel, his face serious, and said, "Mama, I need to tell you something." Mabel turned off the gas stove and gave him her full attention. "What is it, my son?" she asked, her voice filled with concern. "I love you, Mama," he began, his voice barely above a whisper. "Not like a son loves his mother. I mean, I really love you." Mabel froze, her hands trembling slightly. She forced a nervous laugh, trying to dismiss his words. "Of course you love me, Junior. I'm your mother." But Junior shook his head vigorously. "No, Mama, it's not the same. You are the only woman I want. I don't need anyone else." Her heart raced and a lump formed in her throat. She took a step back, unsure of how to respond. "Junior, stop talking nonsense," she said, her voice shaky. But the look in his eyes was intense, almost unsettling. Before she could walk away, Junior reached out and grabbed her arm. "Mama, you don't understand. We're meant to be together," he said, his grip firm. "Let go of me, Junior," she shouted, her voice breaking. She yanked her arm free and stumbled backward, her mind racing. The notebook he had been holding slipped from his hand and fell to the floor. In that moment, Mabel's curiosity overpowered her fear. She bent down and picked up the notebook. As she flipped through its pages, her worst fears were confirmed. The notebook was filled with disturbing writings. Phrases like, "My queen," "No one can take her from me," and "I will do anything to protect her" were scribbled across the pages in bold letters. On one page, Junior had drawn a picture of himself standing beside Mabel, with his father crossed out in thick red ink. Mabel's hands trembled as she closed the notebook. Her mind replayed all the moments she had dismissed as harmless. His jealousy when she laughed with Sam, his refusal to play with other children, his obsessive need to be near her. She realized now that she had ignored all the warning signs, blinded by her belief that her love could never harm him. She quickly grabbed her phone and dialed Sam's number. Her voice was shaky as she spoke. "Sam, come home now. Something is wrong with Junior." Junior's expression darkened when he realized she was calling his father. "Why are you calling him, Mama?" he asked, his voice rising. "He doesn't understand us. He's always trying to take you away from me." Mabel backed away slowly, her heart pounding. "Junior, you're not well. We need to get you help," she said, her voice trembling. Minutes later, Sam burst through the door, his face filled with worry. "What's going on?" he asked, looking between Mabel and Junior. Before Mabel could explain, Junior lunged at his father, shouting, "You don't deserve her. She's mine." The room erupted into chaos as Sam struggled to restrain him. Junior's strength was alarming, and it took all of Sam's effort to subdue him. Mabel stood frozen, tears streaming down her face as she watched her son, the child she had once cradled and protected, turn into someone she no longer recognized. In that moment, the weight of her mistakes crushed her. She realized that her blind love had nurtured something dark, something she could no longer control. After Sam managed to calm Junior down, he turned to Mabel, his voice filled with frustration and anger. "This is your fault, Mabel. I warned you, but you refused to listen. Look at what you've done to him, to us." Mabel couldn't respond. She sank onto the couch, burying her face in her hands. Deep down, she knew Sam was right. Her overprotectiveness had spiraled into something dangerous, and now their family was paying the price. The next morning, Mabel called her mother, Mama Grace, and explained everything. The older woman was shocked but quickly composed herself. "Mabel, this matter no be joke. You need serious help. Take him to the pastor for prayers," she advised. When Sam returned home that evening, Mabel hesitated before bringing up her mother's suggestion. "Sam, Mama Grace thinks we should take Junior to Pastor Emmanuel for deliverance." Sam shook his head firmly. "No, Mabel. This boy doesn't need prayers. He needs professional help, a therapist." Mabel looked torn, unsure of what to do. "But what if it's spiritual, Sam? What if this is not ordinary?" Sam sighed deeply, rubbing his temples. "Whatever it is, we need to handle it carefully. But taking him from one pastor to another will only make things worse. We have to be smart about this." Despite Sam's objections, Mabel couldn't shake the feeling that spiritual intervention was necessary. Over the following days, the tension in the house grew unbearable. Junior's behavior became even more erratic. He refused to sleep in his room and moved his belongings into Mabel's bedroom, insisting on staying with her. The family was at a breaking point, and it was clear that their troubles were far from over. Mabel's hands trembled as she ended the call to Sam. Her heart was racing, and her thoughts were jumbled. Junior's words echoed in her mind. Asterisk, "I love you, Mama," not like a son loves his mother. She couldn't believe what she had just heard. The boy she had raised, her miracle child, had grown into someone she no longer recognized. She paced the room, her mind darting between fear, guilt, and confusion. Junior stood in the corner, his eyes fixed on her. "Mama, why are you so upset? Don't you see? We're meant to be together," he said, his voice calm but unerringly confident. "Junior, stop this nonsense. I am your mother, not your... She couldn't even bring herself to finish the sentence. Before she could say more, the door burst open and Sam rushed in. "What's going on here?" he demanded, looking from Mabel to Junior. Junior's demeanor changed instantly. His calm expression turned into one of anger as he pointed at Sam. "You don't belong here. She's mine, not yours," he shouted. Sam was taken aback. "What are you talking about, boy? Have you lost your mind?" Before Sam could move closer, Junior lunged at him, fists swinging wildly. Sam managed to grab his arms, struggling to hold him back. "Mabel, what is this madness?" Sam yelled, his voice filled with frustration and fear. Mabel stood frozen, tears streaming down her face. She had never seen her son like this before. The boy who used to cling to her wrapper, who once cried at the thought of being away from her, was now attacking his father with an intensity that frightened her. "Junior, stop it," she cried, but her voice only seemed to fuel his rage. Sam, using all his strength, managed to pin Junior against the wall. "Mabel, call someone, anyone. We need help," he shouted. Mabel grabbed her phone, her hands shaking as she dialed the police. "Please come quickly. My son, he's out of control," she said, her voice cracking with emotion. When the police arrived, they found Junior still thrashing against his father's grip. It took 2 officers to restrain him and escort him out of the house. As they placed him in the back of their van, Junior shouted, "Mama, don't let them take me. You're mine. You belong to me." Mabel collapsed onto the floor, her sobs echoing through the room. Sam knelt beside her, his face a mix of anger and despair. "This is what I was trying to warn you about, Mabel. You refused to listen, and now look at what's happened." "I didn't know. I didn't mean for this to happen," Mabel whispered, her voice barely audible. "I just wanted to protect him. I thought I was doing the right thing." Sam stood up, his fists clenched. "Protect him? You've destroyed him. You've turned him into this." He gestured toward the door where the police van had just driven off. For the first time, Mabel felt the full weight of her actions. She had always believed that her love for Junior was pure and selfless, but now she saw how her overprotectiveness had warped his sense of reality. Her mind flashed back to all the moments she had dismissed Sam's warnings, all the times she had indulged Junior's every whim, all the times she had refused to set boundaries. Sam's voice broke through her thoughts. "We have to do something, Mabel. This can't continue. If we don't act now, we'll lose him completely." Mabel nodded, wiping her tears. "What do we do, Sam? How do we fix this?" "We need professional help," Sam said firmly. "Not pastors, not prayer meetings, real help. Therapy, counseling. This boy needs to understand boundaries. And so do you." Mabel hesitated. The idea of therapy was foreign to her, and she knew it would be expensive. But looking at the empty space where Junior had just stood, she realized there was no other choice. "Okay," she said finally, "we'll do whatever it takes." That night, as they lay in bed, Mabel couldn't sleep. Her mind was filled with memories of Junior as a baby, his tiny hands gripping hers, his innocent laughter filling the house. She had wanted to give him everything, to shield him from the pain she had endured. But in doing so, she had created a monster, a boy who didn't understand the difference between love and obsession, between right and wrong. The next morning, they received a call from the police station. Junior had calmed down, but refused to speak to anyone. "He just sits there, staring at the wall," the officer said. "You need to come and decide what to do with him." Mabel and Sam drove to the station, the silence between them heavy with unspoken words. When they arrived, they found Junior sitting in a small cell, his head bowed. He looked up as they entered, and for a moment, Mabel thought she saw a glimpse of the little boy she had once adored. "Mama," he said softly, his voice filled with regret. "I'm sorry." Mabel's heart broke, but she knew that sorry wasn't enough. This was just the beginning of a long journey, one that would test their family in ways they had never imagined. And as they prepared to face the consequences of her actions, Mabel prayed that it wasn't too late to save her son and to save herself from the guilt that threatened to consume her. Sam arrived home just in time to hear Mabel's panicked voice on the phone. She was trembling, tears streaming down her face as she tried to explain what had just happened. Junior was pacing back and forth in the living room, his eyes wild with anger. As soon as Sam stepped in, Junior turned to him, his expression shifting from confusion to fury. "She doesn't need you, Dad," Junior spat, his voice trembling with a mix of anger and desperation. "She's mine, and you keep trying to take her away from me." Sam froze, his mind struggling to process what he had just heard. "Junior, what are you talking about? She's your mother, not." Before he could finish, Junior lunged at him, fists clenched, ready to fight. Mabel screamed, rushing to pull Junior back, but Sam quickly subdued him, holding him down despite his son's wild attempts to break free. "Mabel, this is your doing," Sam shouted as he struggled with Junior. "I warned you. I told you this would happen, but you wouldn't listen." Mabel stood there, shaking and unable to respond. Deep down, she knew Sam was right. She had seen the signs, but her blind devotion to Junior had kept her from acting. After several minutes, Junior finally calmed down, but the damage was done. Sam let go of him, pointing to his room. "Go to your room now," he bellowed. Junior stomped off, slamming the door behind him. The house fell silent except for the sound of Mabel's soft sobs. "Mabel, do you see now?" Sam said, his voice quieter but filled with pain. "This boy is no longer behaving like a son. He's behaving like a man who thinks he owns you. This has gone too far, and we need to fix it before it destroys this family." Mabel nodded weakly, still unable to speak. She knew she had to do something, but she didn't know where to start. The next morning, Mabel called her mother, Mama Grace, and explained everything. Mama Grace listened carefully, her voice firm but compassionate. "Mabel, this is a serious matter. You have to take this boy to the church. He needs prayers and deliverance. This kind of behavior is not ordinary." Sam, overhearing the conversation, interrupted. "Prayers are fine, but this boy needs professional help. He needs therapy, not just deliverance. We have to address this issue properly." Mama Grace wasn't convinced. "Sam, you men don't understand spiritual matters. This is more than psychology. It's a spiritual attack. We need to act fast before it gets worse." Mabel, caught between the two, decided to try both approaches. They first took Junior to a pastor known for his powerful prayers and prophecies. Pastor Emmanuel welcomed them warmly, but as soon as he laid eyes on Junior, his expression changed. "This child is under a strong spiritual influence," Pastor Emmanuel declared. "The enemy has planted a seed of obsession in his heart. He needs deliverance, and it must be done immediately." Without hesitation, Mabel transferred the requested seed offering to the church's account. The deliverance session began, with Pastor Emmanuel praying loudly and calling on the Holy Spirit to break the chains holding Junior. But Junior remained defiant, his expression unchanging, his body tense. At one point, Junior turned to the pastor and said coldly, "You can't take her away from me. She's mine, and no one will change that." The room fell silent. Even Pastor Emmanuel seemed shaken by the boy's boldness. After hours of prayer, there was no change. The family left the church, defeated and confused. The following weeks were filled with visits to other pastors and spiritual leaders, but nothing worked. If anything, Junior's behavior worsened. He refused to leave Mabel's side, moving his belongings into her room and insisting that he would never sleep anywhere else. "Mabel, you have to stop this," Sam said one evening, his voice breaking with frustration. "This boy is controlling you. He's manipulating you. If you don't draw the line, he will destroy himself and this family." Mabel nodded, but her guilt paralyzed her. She didn't know how to distance herself from Junior without feeling like she was betraying him. That night, as she lay awake, Junior's words echoed in her mind. Asterisk, "If I don't have you, then no one will." Asterisk, the thought sent chills down her spine. She realized that her son had crossed a line, and so had she. Her actions, her love, her overindulgence, they had created this monster. She had ignored the boundaries, and now her family was paying the price. The next morning, Mabel tried to speak to Junior about staying in his own room, but he exploded in anger. "You don't love me anymore," he shouted, his voice cracking with emotion. "You're just like Dad, trying to take me away from you." Mabel felt her heart break, but she stood firm. "Junior, I will always love you, but I am your mother, not your wife. You need to understand that." Junior glared at her, his eyes filled with a mix of hurt and fury. "If you don't love me, then I don't need anyone," he muttered before storming off. Mabel knew things had reached a dangerous point. Her son wasn't just confused, he was spiraling, and she could no longer handle it on her own. Something drastic had to be done before it was too late. The night was cold and silent, but the storm raging inside the house was anything but calm. Junior was in his room, his face set with anger, while Mabel sat in the living room, her heart pounding from the earlier confrontation. Sam paced the room, his frustration bubbling over. "Mabel, we need to do something. This boy is no longer acting like a son. He's behaving like something else entirely." Sam's voice cracked, his eyes filled with a mixture of anger and desperation. Mabel couldn't bring herself to look at him. Deep down, she knew he was right. The signs had been there for years, but she had ignored them, dismissing them as harmless displays of affection. Now, things had spiraled out of control. She hugged herself tightly, as if trying to shield herself from the truth that was becoming too heavy to bear. That night, Sam stayed awake, watching over the house, while Mabel lay on the couch, unable to sleep. Her thoughts raced back to all the times she had crossed boundaries with Junior, showering with him, letting him sleep in her bed even when he was old enough to sleep alone, encouraging his jealousy by dismissing Sam's concerns. Each memory felt like a dagger piercing her heart. The next morning, Mabel called her mother, Mama Grace, and tearfully explained everything. Mama Grace listened quietly, her heart sinking as her daughter recounted the events. "Mabel, I warned you. I told you to draw a line. Love is good, but when it lacks discipline, it becomes dangerous. What do I do now, Mama? Junior is not the boy I used to know. He's angry, territorial, and I'm scared of what he might do next," Mabel admitted, her voice trembling. "You must act fast. Take him to a pastor. This is not just ordinary behavior. It's spiritual. The bond you created has gone beyond natural. You need prayers," Mama Grace said firmly. When Sam returned from work, Mabel told him about her mother's suggestion. "We need to take him to church. Pastor Nathan can pray for him and break whatever is causing this." Sam shook his head. "Church alone won't solve this, Mabel. He needs therapy. He needs a professional who can address his mental and emotional issues. This isn't just a spiritual matter. It's psychological too." The argument over what to do next added to the tension already hanging thick in the air. Eventually, Mabel, desperate for a solution, took Junior to Pastor Nathan the following Sunday. The moment they stepped into the church, the pastor's eyes widened as he looked at Junior. "This child is under a spiritual influence," he declared. "Deposit 500,000 naira now, and we will begin his deliverance." Without hesitation, Mabel transferred the money. As the prayers began, Junior stood still, his expression unreadable. When Pastor Nathan approached to lay hands on him, Junior grabbed the pastor's robe and tore it with surprising strength, shouting, "Leave me alone! You can't take her away from me." The congregation gasped, and church security rushed to restrain Junior. Mabel stood frozen, her heart breaking as she watched her son struggle against the men holding him. After that incident, Mabel and her mother took Junior to different pastors across the city, hoping for a breakthrough. But nothing changed. Instead, Junior's behavior worsened. He became more possessive, refusing to leave Mabel's side and moving all his belongings into her room. One night, as Mabel sat in her room, Junior stormed in with a determined look on his face. "Mama, why don't you understand? I don't need anyone else. You are all I want," he shouted. "Junior, I'm your mother. This is not right," Mabel cried, tears streaming down her face. "If I can't have you, then no one will," Junior yelled before storming out of the room. The next day, Mabel couldn't take it anymore. She decided to send Junior to a boarding school far away, hoping the distance would help break the unhealthy bond. But when she told Junior about her decision, he exploded with anger. "You want to send me away? So you can be with him," he shouted, referring to Sam. That night, as Sam returned from work, he found Mabel crying on the veranda. Before she could explain, Junior ran out of the house, shouting at the top of his lungs, "She's mine. Stay away from her." Sam had had enough. He immediately called the police. When they arrived and took Junior into custody, Mabel collapsed into Sam's arms, sobbing uncontrollably. "What have I done to my son? How did it get this bad?" she wailed. Sam held her tightly, his voice firm but filled with sadness. "Mabel, this is the only way. He needs help, and so do we." As the police car drove away, taking Junior to a juvenile detention center, Mabel watched with a heavy heart. She realized that her blind love and refusal to set boundaries had created a monster she could no longer control. The family's journey to healing had only just begun, but the scars of the past would remain with them forever. That night, as Mabel lay in bed, the weight of her mistakes pressing down on her, she whispered a prayer for her son. "Lord, please save him. Save us. Don't let my love destroy him completely."